Hello, everyone. We're having Christopher Jackson. Hello, Chris. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Nice. Great to be here.
So, we're doing this Learn One Thing event where we're trying to learn, discover something new about stuttering, how we deal with stuttering, what we can do with stuttering. And I asked you a question, what comes first to your mind, and you said that without being comfortable with people seeing you block, it's almost impossible to make progress. And that's a beautiful thought. I love it so much. And maybe before we jump into it, actually, maybe a short introduction. So, and you correct me if something's wrong. You're one of the co-founders, like Ayo Adesanya, of StopHoldingBack charity. And like I saw you in quite a few videos where you went outside, approaching strangers, doing like, probably you call it working on your speech, doing all those things where you probably use the techniques to talk to strangers, right? And which is very encouraging, inspiring, and like for most people who stutter, we might feel like, oh, that's a good thing, but when it comes to actually doing it, it feels like, no, I'm not doing it. So that's a big thing. So coming back to your thought, why, can you share maybe, why without being comfortable, like with people seeing your block, it's hard, it's almost impossible to make progress? Like, what's behind that?
Well, I think the key thing to highlight here is when I say progress, what I'm actually referring to is real progress in situations, speaking situations that mean the most to you as an individual. So what usually happens, and what I've seen and what I've personally experienced myself, this is because of my own journey, is you learn a technique, you attend a course, or you work with a specific person who can teach you a technique. When you're around that person, or when you're at that course, or when you're in a certain environment, you're able to use the technique pretty well. You're able to speak quite comfortably. You're not concerned about anybody judging you or how people look at you. So you're pretty good, and everything seems to work when you're in that specific environment.
Right.
However, when you go into a real world environment, as what I like to refer to it as, a situation that really means something to me, where I want to have a good level of control, less anxiety, being able to talk on my terms, but not really worry about people's reactions. Those areas are where people tend to struggle to make progress in. And they can't understand why I'm able to speak over here when I'm talking to my coach or I'm in this environment, and then when I'm at work, or when I'm around my family, or when I'm walking to a shop asking for something on my own, and I'm not in a working on my speech mindset, I'm just living my life the way I want to live it, I'm unable to execute what I've learned, or I'm unable to have the same mentality and mindset as when I'm in my coached environment. And that's what I mean by making progress. And the reason why I was unable to do that, and just for the people listening, I know Ayo was on here a couple of days ago, I think, AO was actually my coach. And one thing that me and AO used to argue about is AO said, you are scared for people to see you block. And that's why you're unable to make progress in the areas of your life that mean the most to you. And the reason why we were able to get to that is because AO was very honest with me as a coach on how he deals with his speech. I felt like I was able to be honest with him. So I was able to tell him, call him up, speak to him with really good level of fluency, because that's the word that people like to use. I was able to speak to him, and I was comfortable to tell him, Ayo, this isn't working for me in this area. I wasn't able to execute that. I wanted to, my intention was to do it, but I just was unable to. And he was like, because you're comfortable for people to know you have a stutter, providing you can tell them completely fluently. You're not comfortable for people to see you actively block. And that's what's preventing you from experimenting. That's what's preventing you from implementing what you're learning over here and implementing it in situations that matter to you. So that's why I realized that that is what was holding me back. And ultimately, we learn tools and techniques because we want to mask our stutter, we want to overcome it, we want to stop blocking completely. But the truth is, and the harsh reality is, there is no cure. Regardless of what program you're on, regardless of what stuttering technique or intervention program you may be a part of, that is not a cure, because a cure does not exist. So there will be times where you will block, even though you're on this program, even though you're doing this technique. And if you're worried about people seeing you block, it will hold you back from executing it in areas that matter most to you in life, which will prevent you from progressing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. At the same time, I totally agree, and I think it's probably, I think that's the hardest part, the bottleneck of our improvement, because, as you said, we can learn the techniques, different techniques, many techniques, but when we get to real life, probably I see two things. First, the speed, the pace in real life is a little bit higher, faster than when we're practicing in the classroom, third room, whatever, in our peers. And the second, which is maybe more important, as you said, we still feel something about that block or speech impediment when it happens, and it's not a pleasant feeling. So how, it's great to realize that, but how to actually become more comfortable? Is it only through doing and trying to get comfortable, or what's the way to become more comfortable with other people seeing us block?
The way to become comfortable, and the way in which I began to feel comfortable, is I stopped comparing my journey to other people's journey. I stopped comparing myself to fluent speakers. I stopped comparing how I spoke in a meeting to how other people were contributing in a meeting at work. And I realized that I'm on my own journey, and I trusted in what I was told and how to execute things to do it at my pace. Because when we talk about the pace of real life, it's completely different. That's only because that pace is we're allowing that pace to dictate how we feel we should be speaking.
Right.
And if we try to live up to other people's expectations of how we should be speaking, that's another thing that will stop our progress, because we have to progress at a certain rate. our journey has to take certain steps. And if we try to leapfrog, and if we try to live in a world where we can just use a hit and hold or a block and let go to get us out of trouble and be completely fine the rest of the time, you're going to find yourself struggling quite often, and then that's going to affect how you feel. And the way we feel reflects how we think. So when we're thinking in a negative way, it stops us from being able to motivate ourselves to execute what we know we should be again. So it's about just focusing on your journey, understanding the path that you're on, having your clear vision, your long-term vision, which will allow you to stay on the road that you're on, rather than allowing other people to dictate to you how you should be behaving around them. If you notice, there's a lot of people who do not have a stutter, but they may speak a little bit differently, or they may speak slowly, or they may take their time. These people do not allow others to dictate to them how to speak. But because we have a stutter and we know that, or we feel that it's an issue for other people, we feel like we have to live up to other people. But this is just the way that we speak, and we have to get comfortable with, this is the way I speak. Like this certain individual may speak a bit slowly in anything, or someone may not be able to be concise with their message and they go around the houses. That's not a stuttering related issue. That's a communication issue. And we have to realize this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we're working on, and we can't allow other people to dictate anything to us. And if we can get past that, then we can replace negative experiences with positive ones. And then your belief system begins to change. And over a longer period of time, on a journey that I'm still nowhere near the end, I'm still working on this, but the blocking becomes less and less and less, because you genuinely know that you're talking on your terms. And this is something that I'm still continuing to work on.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because that's exactly what we all feel, that when we get into that environment, the situation, it kind of pulls us, and like it's easy to lose, as you said, like that feeling that I'm speaking on my terms. You kind of you become part of that environment, and it affects you big time. It pulls you to the, again, like pace, speed of other speakers, because if you're presented like now it's your turn, you feel like this is the way you need to continue, and maybe this is not your pace, not the way where you feel comfortable that this is like this is your speaking. You kind of try to match the expectations you have in your mind, you've created in your mind. So the environment is playing a huge role, and it's really hard to, like, again, stay in your speaking, making sure that this is the speaking that you want to speak with, you're comfortable with at this stage. And again, maybe one of the things how we do it is still coming back to, again, to the techniques. Can you share just a little bit about your techniques? Because I know probably like block and release, or hit and hold, something like all these, maybe again you share a little bit, but probably like many other techniques, they reveal that we like either stutter or work on our speech, call it whatever, but we reveal that we're different, which is actually like the hard part to actually show and reveal, rather than try to hide it and pretend we're normal. So can you share a little bit about the techniques that you're using?
Yeah, so the techniques that I use is a connected breathing pattern. I try to be conscious that I'm continuously breathing, because a lot of people, when they block, and to be honest, for me, the breathing pattern or the breathing technique, the breathing technique that you use for me is not the end of the world. It's not the be all and end all. It's just having a continuous breathing pattern that is for me. I self-analyze that, well, a lot of people, when they block, they're holding their breath. So when you're in the middle of a block, you're holding your breath, which makes it so difficult to push through a block, even if you wanted to. So for me, just having a continuous breathing pattern really helps me to have good, controlled speech. But in terms of the physical techniques, yes, I do use a block and let go. I do use hit and hold. I do throw a deep tone in there every once in a while. But the reason why I use them is in tense situations, I know that my tension's so high that I need to show people that I don't speak like you. I need to tell them straight away. I can't, and by telling them, I'm not talking about a disclosure where you would literally say to them, "Hi, I have a stutter, try to be a bit patient with me." It's about showing them that you talk differently so they know. And this is something that it's important for me to mention, that I still do have trouble. I still find myself in situations that I struggle to do that fully comfortably. Yes, there are many situations that I can do it in now, but there are many situations as well that I still have a lot of tension. I still struggle to be completely cool with it and execute what I know to execute. It's become very situational for me. Yeah, right, the situations get few and far between the further you get on your journey, but to sit here and say, yeah, this is what I do in every situation would be a lie. But when the tension is really high, I know I have to do that in order to make my tension drop. Ultimately, why is the tension there? Because you don't want the person to see you block.
Right.
You don't want the person to look at you in a certain way. You don't want to be judged. And there's areas of our lives that we can fully address that type of judgment. And then there'll be other areas of our lives that we haven't yet. And that's the case for me now. And that's what I'm continuing to work on. So those are the main reasons why I use the technique, because I know if I don't, it could lead to a tendency to avoid.
Right.
It could lead to a tendency to word swap.
Right.
And for me personally, when you do any type of work on your speech, regardless of the approach, the technique, the program, non-avoidance is non-negotiable. You cannot be working on your speech and avoiding words, in my opinion, because that's not working on your speech. That's just reinforcing something that we already work on. As a stutterer, we always try to avoid. We try to do word swap. We try to get through conversations without the listener knowing that we have a stutter. Usually, we can't do that very successfully. Sometimes we can, if you've developed a way that you can, but ultimately that's not doing much good for your mental state.
Right.
And that's what is just as important to work on. So those are the reasons why I use technique, because I need my mindset to be in a certain way when I'm in a high pressured or high tense environment.
And I have a couple questions about this. First, if you can, I really, again, like breathing happens kind of naturally, automatically. I don't notice you breathing in any special way. Can you explain when you say you're making sure that you breathe, what exactly you are doing? How do you make sure that you breathe?
I don't like to overcomplicate the breathing. Many people do. But when I was working on my speech, at the beginning of my journey, there was a big emphasis on a certain breathing technique, which was coastal breathing. And as I started to develop my belief system and my self-doubt was removed from certain words, I realized that I found myself in situations where I was no longer coastal breathing, but still had good speech. And I realized that it wasn't the breathing that was allowing me to get the words out, even though that's what I was trained to believe. That's what I was conditioned to believe. And what I realized is when I went through episodes of blocking, my breathing was all over the place. I was freezing.
Right.
As long as I am aware that I've got full breath when I'm talking, you may see me not breathing a certain way or it's not exaggerated, but I do make sure and ensure that I have full breath when I try to speak. When I'm in high tense situations or when I'm going through an episode of blocking, my breathing is always non-connected, if you know what I mean. It's always sporadic. It's always off. So I don't like to put too much emphasis on it. I know that the reason why I'm not breathing is because of how my mentality and my mindset is in that situation. Because breathing is a natural thing. It's a subconscious thing. It should remain a subconscious thing. But at times it has to be conscious if you're not in the right frame of mind and you're struggling with a particular situation.
Right. Yeah. I got your point. At the same time, probably breathing also affects our general state. Like when we breathe, anyway, we send some maybe signal to our body that we calm down. Like So I got you that you're making sure, anyways, that you have air, like for that speaking piece, but how you feel overall, like the anxiety, the tension, it actually maybe even more like plays even a bigger role. And
I'm sorry, no, if you're feeling different type of emotions, then it will affect your breathing. Like, for example, when someone experiences a panic attack,
right,
what's the first thing you're told to do? Take a breath, breathe. That's the first thing you're told to do. So depending on how I feel, tells me how I need to be responding to myself, not reacting. See, with speech, what we tend to do is we tend to try to use everything in a reactive way. But that can only come after a certain stage of your journey, after you've experienced a lot. You can't just start reacting. So you need to be analysing what's happening and then trying to respond to the situation properly. So if I walk into a room and there's 20 people I've never seen before and I have to pitch something to them, I'm going to start to feel a certain way. It's only natural for anyone, not just someone that stutters. But it's just, it comes out in us with speech blocks. Other people may get hot, they may get sweaty, they may get, but for us, it comes out in our speech. So that tells me, okay, you need to be conscious of your breathing pattern here, because if you start holding your breath, pushing through blocks, you know where that got you in the past. And you can't be expecting a different result in the future. So that's just my approach to it. It's not all centered around a breathing pattern. Breathing is important, but it's clear that it's important. Without breath, there is no life. So we all know it's important. But in terms of your belief system, blocking is your self-doubt on your ability to say that word in that given moment. And if you start holding your breath and your emotions are running wild with you, it's only going to make it worse for you.
Gotcha.
And that's just from my personal experience on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question I want to ask, you said that you're not actively disclosing, like I stutter, like you're using the techniques that make obvious that you're speaking differently. To me personally, it's pretty much like in the nutshell, it's very close to disclosure. Like, do you see any, like, what's the difference for you, if there is any difference, for disclosure and using those techniques in the very obvious way? It's pretty much the same effect, if you would.
Yeah, the reason why I tend to advertise rather than just say it in a sentence to people is I feel like in the past when I've tried to disclose, it's always been in quite an apologetic way. Be like, okay, I have a stutter, you may have to wait for me, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
And I realised that was putting me in a bit more of a worse situation mentally.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm working on my speech, I'm trying to improve, but I apologise if you have to wait for me. But there's no need to apologise. We dictate how people respond to us. We only allow people to treat us the way we let them treat us. And I feel like by looking them in the eye, standing up straight, and just advertising using your techniques, because that's the way you speak, that is dictating to them, you can't be worrying about the way I speak because I'm not worried about it, so you shouldn't worry about it. Let's get on with the conversation. This is how I need to speak in order to speak on my terms.
Right.
So it's not about handing over all the authority to the next person. It's not about just saying, listen, I'm really happy to be here to be able to speak to you. It's about, this is me, this is how I talk, and there's no need for anyone to be worried about it here. This is just my speaking technique. And that's the approach that I'm trying to implement now in all areas of my life. Like I said before, it's not perfect all the time.
Yeah.
There are figures of authority that you will struggle with, that you will find it more difficult to speak to a certain individual over another individual.
Yeah.
But over time, you just have to keep working on it, chipping away at it, just keep doing it, and then eventually you realise that people are not really that bothered about how you speak. It's more about the content. It's more about what you're bringing to the conversation. And if you're going to allow the way you speak to stop you bringing important messages and important things to the conversation, then you're working on your speech, but you're still losing.
Yeah.
You know, but now that's not to say that there is a way to disclose that is a more positive way. Of course there is. There is. I just found that when I used that route, I was leaning more towards the negative side. And I was struggling to make it into a clear positive consistently. I found a lot more consistency with just advertising.
Yeah, got you. Yeah, I absolutely agree and got your point. And it might seem like a very tiny little difference when we say I stutter, or maybe like the very disclosure could be like, you know, I'm working on my speech. So that's a bit different disclosure. In the nutshell, again, it's pretty much the same. We're disclosing that we are in this transition state or mode from where we are to where we want to be. But the way we disclose, either through, as you say, through just deliberate speaking on my terms, or also saying that, you know, like I'm speaking on my terms, like we can say that deliberately.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if the way you're speaking it opens up that conversation. It's perfectly fine to have that conversation with the person that's listening to you. That's perfectly fine. I just feel that, for me personally, if I'm in a high tense situation and I need to explain that to them, then I'm not advertising correctly. I'm not doing what I need to be doing properly to get myself through that conversation or that speaking situation. That's just the way I've learned through my journey. I've found myself disclosing but still struggling to use technique. So even though I've told them that I have a stutter, I'm still struggling to implement things that I know need to be implemented. So that's just why this way for me, I'm implementing it from the off. I'm off to a great start. I'm starting as I mean to go on. And the listeners are comfortable with it because I'm being me, which allows them to be them.
Right. But again,
it's not always the case in every situation.
Yeah. And again, I'm paying much attention because I know this is a very, very big point for us, because like we start like, again, we of course naturally want to come back to the comfort of not talking, not revealing ourselves, not stuttering, not seeing other people, seeing our block. And one of the things that, again, I had in my experience when I used my techniques more, or my students use more vividly, that response of other people, sometimes people are like surprised, or like, have you had the instance when you felt you need to clarify what's going on, or like that really never happened for you?
No, of course I have. Of course I have. You start speaking with exaggerated technique like this, you may get a reaction. Chances are you will get a reaction. What I try to work on is desensitizing myself to that reaction, to the point that the person can get on with the conversation. But you have to read the situation. There's people that are comfortable with it. There's people that are not comfortable with it, and it's up to you to have that emotional intelligence to know when to do it. At the beginning of my journey, yes, everything would be a disclosure. I would be coming into work. I would be ringing people. But before we start this conversation, I just want to tell you I have a stutter. Yeah, it's fine. It worked. It was great. But over a period of time, I was like, well, if I just advertised and spoke like this, people will know. People will get comfortable with it. People just have to accept it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do get reactions, but as a stutterer, you've had reactions your whole life, right?
Yeah.
So this is no different. You're just now talking on your terms, as opposed to getting a reaction and not knowing when that word's ever going to come out.
Right.
Or thinking a million things in your mind to try and think of an alternative word to get out.
Yeah.
So it's just my strategy. Listen. People have their own ways. People have their own vision of how they want to disclose and let people know. But I've found that the reaction when I do it like this has been the way I wanted it to go, more consistently, and the conversation has gone in a way that I wanted it to go more consistently, as opposed to someone having a window to think, okay, this person's got a stutter, they're apologizing, I have the authority in this conversation. Which I don't like. I don't want that to be the case for anyone who stutters. Just because it takes us longer to get our words out, we still have as much authority in any conversation as the person we're speaking to who does not have a stutter. So it's about just being assertive from the off. And I found like when I was disclosing, it wasn't allowing me to be assertive. It was being too apologetic. This is the route that I take.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and, that's a big question I wanted to ask. You actually mentioned that a little bit about the progress, because you said that, like in your initial thought, there was, like, we need to be comfortable with other people seeing us block in order to make progress. How do you actually, maybe one more time, maybe, how do you measure if there is any measure for progress, or how do you feel your progress, or maybe at some point you just lost that measure, you just being yourself, and like what's the way with the progress? How to approach this at all?
How do I measure progress? Is
that or maybe approach the progress, because maybe there is not much to measure. Maybe I'm not sure.
I think in terms of working on your speech, the way I measure my progress is regardless of how well my previous speaking situation went, it will not have any impact on how I approach the next one. That's what I measure my progress on. Like, just because a speaking situation didn't go well for me this morning, it isn't going to make me message you and say, Andre, something's come up, I'm not able to come on this live. You know, that's how I measure progress. Being willing to approach a speaking situation regardless of what the potential outcome could be. And that's, for me, what working on your speech is all about. It's not about how fluent can you be. It's about what are you prepared to do now that you wasn't prepared to do before you started to work on your speech. Has that changed? Has your baseline changed for you now? Because I believe that with anything, you will fall back. You will have moments of setback. I've been working on my speech for over 2 years. I've had many setbacks. I've had periods where I've just wanted to give up. I just wanted to turn my back on the whole stuttering world, the community, techniques, everything. There's been times where I thought, like this isn't working for me. It doesn't work. But what happens is your baseline increases every time. So you can never go back to where you originally were. Yes, all right, you may block on a word, you may stutter, you may have a negative speaking experience, but you won't return to where you were. And that's what we like to that's how we like to measure progress. Like, for example, in the last week I've had a few difficult speaking situations, but I will still come on a live to you. I've done a podcast that ran for 100 days straight. If you do something for 100 days straight, there's going to be bad days in there. You still have to show up. And there'll be days at work where you may have to speak. You're having what you consider a bad day, which we're entitled to have bad days, but you still have to get on with your job. You still have to talk to that person. You still have to make that phone call. And are you prepared to do it or not? Are you prepared to stand in the firing line and see what happens, learn about yourself, still have that student mentality, or are you going to avoid it? And as long as I'm not avoiding and I'm taking on challenges and I'm speaking, I'm making progress. It's not about level of fluency for me. Even though level of fluency is nice, you know, it is nice. When you can say whatever you want on cue, it is nice. I'm not gonna try to paint a picture that I don't care about. Nothing like that. It is nice. People feel better when they're able to speak with ease. But when you know you're not going to speak with ease and you're still prepared to go into that situation, that for me is real progress.
Gotcha. And sorry, you mentioned a podcast and you have a very professional gear there. What is the podcast you are referring to?
It was the SHB Unfiltered podcast. We
Oh,
started it at the
right.
beginning.
Right.
Yeah, at the beginning of lockdown, we started it and we committed to doing it every day during lockdown.
Wow.
Which lasted for, I think it lasted for about 90 days, the official lockdown in the UK, but then we just couldn't finish on an odd number. We wanted to get to that 100, so we took it to 100 and we're taking a break now.
Gotcha. Wow, that's beautiful. So, I don't want to take much of your time, but, about the progress and about what you said about different environments, different situations. That's also, again, one of the elements, maybe, of the progress. How do you still deal with those situations, as you say, where you feel much higher levels of anxiety? Like, as you say, new people, you need to make some presentation or something where you feel like... and it's always like happening when we reveal ourselves to new people. Anyway, we go through again and again this feeling that people are going to judge us. How do I show up? So, how do you deal with those, maybe the hardest situations?
I manage my expectations. I think that's key. I think when you're walking into a situation that is difficult for you, it's because it's new to you. Like, for example, even since working on my speech, I hated Zoom calls. I hated them. I didn't like speaking over Zoom. I worked on talking over the phone to the point that I became comfortable with that. So the thought of a video call used to give me tension. And this is 2 years after working on my speech. So what happens is the more you do something, the more you're working on it, the more it becomes natural, the more you get to know it. And we did, referring back to the 100 episodes of the podcast, we did them recorded on Zoom and streamed live on Facebook for 100 days straight. So now, when I come on to a live with you, even though I may have stuttered outside to someone that works with me, this is perfectly fine. I've been here before. Mm-hmm. But if you look at episode 1, you can see my tension. Uh-huh. You can see that I'm unsure. You can see that I'm carefully thinking about every single sentence I'm saying. And you have to manage your expectations. You can't let that get you down. Right. And make you freeze and not carry on and start making progress. It's like there's organizations, I'm sure you've heard of Toastmasters, and people have to make an icebreaker speech. Icebreaker speech is called icebreaker for a reason. You know, it's your first time. No one's expecting you to be perfect, but we expect perfection of ourselves. Right. And rather, what I try to reframe in my mind now, which again, I'm not perfect, so I do struggle with this at times as well. But I try to maintain a student mentality. So yes, it's going to be hard, but what am I going to learn out of it? Wow. Manage your expectations, see what I've done good, but also you got to see, okay, what went wrong? What were your intentions? Did you behave in the way that you originally set out? Were you allowing others to dictate to you how to behave? You know, if the answer to some of these questions is yes, then you should use that as excitement to go again and to improve and to learn. So yeah, it's just about having the student mentality and wanting to learn and improve. Continuous improvement is the most important thing for me. So that's how I deal with difficult situations. Not expecting too much and seeing what I can learn out of it. Wow, that's just beautiful. I love it so much. Yeah, and this, as you say, student mentality is so much more powerful than trying to be perfect and feeling like that's an exam or something like that. Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, because even though people become coaches, they're still students of life, right? Yeah. It's still, stuttering is such a complex thing to deal with that even though you can coach someone else on your tools and techniques, there's still so much for you to learn as an individual.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to realize. And if we can continue to adopt the student mentality, it means when we hit tough times, when we do have setbacks, we still want to go again. We still want to improve.
Yeah.
But if we try to give off this level of expertise to everyone, then we're putting ourselves under pressure that if you do go through a troubled time, oh no, this shouldn't be happening because I'm supposed to be an expert.
Right. Right.
I still have a stutter. I'm still a normal person that has a stutter. Just because I know how to work on it, that doesn't mean I'm perfect at implementing it all the time. So there's always things to learn. And I started working on my speech at 28 years old. Cannot reverse 28 years of trauma and tough speaking situations in 2 years. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
So you have to manage your expectations and realize it's a journey, and a journey with no clear finish line or destination. You know, so as long as you're prepared to not be a know-it-all, continue to learn, have an open mind, experiment, then we can enjoy the process. If we don't enjoy the process, you will fall off because there is no clear destination.
Wow, that's beautiful. Wow, this is the one thing to learn. Actually, you shared quite a few things to learn. That's beautiful. So, thank you so much, Christopher. I don't want to take much of your time. Thanks everyone who's been watching or will watch. And yes, let's keep in touch. Let's stay in touch. Thank you so much, Christopher, for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.